This is a video about rot. If you're a fan of Marvel and DC, then you've most certainly seen a character that you love written in a way that just misunderstands everything about them. This is true for my favourite character in comics, John Constantine of the series Hellblazer. Johnny was created by Alan Moore for his series Swamp Thing, and later received a spin-off in the pages of the adult imprint Verti-gone. He was one of the characters who suffered the most from Flashpoint in the New 52 reboot, when DC reinvented itself for a new audience with a new status quo. Hellblazer was always meant to be a mature, adult-only story that pulled no punches. But I'm not going to pretend that things were okay before Flashpoint, before Johnny was watered down into a flashy PG-13 mage. No, Hellblazer had lost its way before then. Before DC execs tried to force the square peg into the triangle hole, Hellblazer was already misunderstanding what it was all about. It had begun to betray itself long before then. And today, I want to take a look at that. What Hellblazer was, what it became, what was left of it, and how it found its footing again with one run, one revival, one author. I'm not going to be recapping the stories. I won't be talking about the Newcastle incident where a little girl was dragged to hell, or the time John cured his cancer by tricking devils, or when he calls God's bluff, because these are all great stories that deserve to be read, not recounted. Rather, the point of this video is to explore what makes Hellblazer so special. I'll be predominantly focusing on aspects introduced in the premiere run by Gemma Delano, and hopefully by the end of it, you'll come away with an appreciation for the Laughing Magician, as well as an itch to dive in for yourself. The thing about John Constantine is that you need the writer to be from the British Isles. An American has no business writing this character. John's Englishness is not a quirk, it's inseparable from his and his story's identities. He's not simply a working class character, he's Scoos. It's not the sexiest accent, but we've seen his voice over the years slowly morph into a vague general English voice that sort of pays slight homage to his Liverpool roots, but not really. Like any good horror, it's not about the scary monsters. It's about what they represent. Hellblazer is about England and the specific culture of its working class. That's why he's Scoos. Hellblazer is about the downtrodden. Hellblazer is about rot. The book's debut run, penned by Gemma Delano, isn't what a lot of people today would expect from the character. It's very late 80s. There's an arc where John lays low with a hippie commune. There's a couple of issues where he dives into cyberspace and discovers that you can use it to travel to heaven. There's a law preventing storybook characters like Sherlock Holmes from escaping to the real world until their copyright expires. And there's a two-parter that unpacks ecofeminism. It's trippy, introspective, and surreal. Two of the major groups in early Hellblazer are religious cults preying on those whom are emotionally vulnerable, including John's sister and his niece, Cheryl and Gemma Masters, the latter of whom is very important. Hellblazer is a domestic horror. A lot of the villains are old men serial killers, homophobes, neo-Nazi teenagers, and the police. This is a society in disrepair, one where the boundaries that once clearly defined society are starting to collapse. This is a world where those in the global north can't even benefit off of the Empire anymore. The demonic side of Hellblazer is just window dressing, a creative illustration of a very familiar domestic evil. Delano makes it clear that he understands intersectionality, but especially in the two-parter, Men's Work and Boys' Games, in which he explores how the cruel, inhumane treatment of livestock is inseparable from toxic masculinity. This is why I don't call Hellblazer punk lightly. Delano's run is very postmodern, and it's willing to confront things that even a lot of progressives now don't really care for. Everything is connected. The distinctions in which society functions, the boundaries that we use to define notions of sexuality, identity, and morality are falling apart. And that means both angels and devils walk amongst us. After all, what's the difference? This is a new world, a chaotic one with the exact concoction to birth a trickster, a con man, a laughing magician, a Hellblazer. When I said that Hellblazer is about England, that's not to say that other countries aren't present. Delano, from the very first issue, is very comfortable with having John fly to the United States. The US and England were very close at this time, bound by the pro-capitalist views of privatization and free market. In the third issue, during the British election of 1987, John faces demon stockbrokers in the human soul market. And they want Margaret Thatcher to win because the Conservative Party does wonders for making the human soul market boom. There is no subtext to Delano. Hellblazer is punk. John was even in a punk band in his early years. It is loud in its politics. Thatcher and the US President Ronald Reagan were often referred to as political soulmates, seemingly one and the same. That's what's so important about the portrayal of America in Hellblazer. It's an extension. It should never be the prominent location of John Constantine. The issue after we're introduced to Cheryl and Gemma Masters, and the cult that they're a part of, John goes to the US and comes across the exact same cult. And the story of this issue connects the town's reliance on this predatory warping of Christianity to another town member's PTSD from his time serving in Vietnam. That's the thing about the sovereign USA. Although it's far more powerful than the fledgling British Empire, its spirit is nothing more than an extension of its former colonial ties. It's the same cult. Hellblazer is about England. Hellblazer is about rot. And the civilized world has refused to burn away its rot. Regarding the neo-Nazi teenagers that I mentioned, when a demon combines them into one single monster that John has to take down, he can't help but laugh at the fact that each of the monster's arms has a different football team tattoo. And John points out the irony that if they weren't a demon or white supremacists, they'd be at each other's throats. Which is true, and stupid because it's football. It's such an arbitrary point of conflict. But as Lyndon B. Johnson once said, if you can convince the lowest white man that he is better than the best coloured man, he won't notice that you're picking his pocket. Hell, give him someone to look down on, and he'll empty his pockets for you. The political right is infested, rotting, with neo-Nazis. It's a feature. It's exactly what the conservatism entails. It requires an other. It is the culture of Thatcherism. Hell is empty, and all the demons are here. Something that's been lost in the common perception of John Constantine is the expansiveness and variety of his mythology. Even in his post-Flashpoint DC era, the magic was very Abrahamic. The occult aspects were demonic in the Christian pop culture sense. But there's a broader spirituality to Hellblazer. He befriends the Lord of the Dance, a pagan spirit of festivities. He travels to Australia and defends the land of the Aboriginals through a deal with the Rainbow Serpent. And he uncovers a government conspiracy to harness mankind's psychic energy through natural ley lines and ancient stone circles of mystical energy to take over the world by making everyone feel fear. There is a chaotic magic to this world that is too diverse to narrow down to this sexy, gothic Christianity, as much as I do love to indulge in that. Hellblazer is punk. It's decentralized. Everything coexists. Our understanding of truth and fiction doesn't hold any water here. I mentioned a former Vietnam soldier with PTSD and how he was the victim of imperial schemes, but the story doesn't treat him with sympathy. Sure, he was indoctrinated like a cult member, but what he is shown to have done in Vietnam, to civilians and especially to women, is unforgivable. Personal responsibility is important, and that brings me to what is one of the most fundamental themes of Hellblazer and John Constantine's character as a whole. You see, it doesn't matter that Thatcher was a woman. Iron Lady be damned, conservatism and patriarchy are intrinsically connected. Thatcher was just willing to throw other women under the bus in order to climb the ladder herself. Hellblazer is about the evil that men do, whether they recognize it or not. And that includes John Constantine. My favourite story arc of Vertigo Hellblazer is The Golden Child. It's Delano's grand exit, an exploration of John's dissatisfaction and self-hatred. It opens with a flashback to his childhood, when he and his sister Cheryl moved in with their uncle and aunt, while their dad was away on work business. John later learns from some bullies that his father was actually thrown into prison for stealing women's underwear. John, a child, doesn't understand why his father will be after something so useless. And after hearing his uncle abusing his aunt during the night, he questions her in the morning about the two men, to which she replies, "Men do some strange things in this world, boy. Things only God and them understand. You'll be one of them then, poor little sod." John hugs her and cries, "I won't. I'm not gonna grow up. I'm gonna stay here with you." His words aren't framed by panels. They exist outside of them, outside of the story being written. They are John's attempts to be better than what he, as a man, will be raised to be. This is integral. This is character defining. Remember this. The rest of the arc follows John trying to rekindle his relationships with two members of that old hippie commune, his old flame Marge, and the teenage telepath Mercury. "I won't! I'm not gonna grow up!" "Make me warm, Marge." Now. We get a two-parter about a farmer who abuses his family and tries to man up his boy by terrorizing him with the slaughter of pigs. Mercury ultimately gives him his comeuppance with a dominatrix pig lady. There's an ecofeminist reading here, but this is about a cycle of patriarchy, toxic masculinity, and hurting the world with it. After that's out of the way, John goes on a magical acid trip and discovers that he, as a sickly newborn, had devoured his healthier twin in the womb in order to survive, and had killed his mother in childbirth. Funnily enough, John's birthday falls on Mother's Day. This is why his father resented him, the father whom John eventually got killed, the father who haunts John with coat hangers surrounding him. This is what began the cycle anew. He sees another world, one of the Golden Boy, a spectre who has haunted John his entire life. It is who his twin would have become if John had allowed himself to die, if John had given up. The first act of John's life was him stepping over someone else to get ahead. The Golden Boy was the Magus, the tarot embodying a person's full, realized state. The Golden Boy had the love of his father. The Golden Boy saved his friends and didn't damn a little girl to hell. And when the Golden Boy sees John seeing him, he's kind and extends an arm. The two embrace, and on the beach, John's companions only find a grave. It's pretty spiritual and open-ended, especially if we look at Delano's run by itself. Is John dead? Maybe. Or perhaps John is born again with a new desire to become the Magus, become the Golden Boy, become a better man.
School bag in hand, she leaves home.
The writer that followed Delano, Garth Ennis, would go on to define the character as we know him. This is where the demonic Christian horror comes from, where the politics become even more overt and rude and angry. This works in a lot of places, but Ennis is not the most tactful man. I understand that it might just not be for me, but I find his overindulgence in sexual violence extremely gratuitous and in poor taste. But his work on Hellblazer is different. There's a moment in his run where he subverts my expectations of him. It's a moment when John finds out that his sex worker friend was beaten by her pimp. I don't know, when I was in there I just had to get out. I felt so bloody useless. Oh Christ. Did he rape her? You want it that way so it's really bad. So you can get good and angry enough to go out there and commit whatever atrocity you've got in mind for that guy. It won't help Helen one bit, but you don't care because you know you're no good at helping her anyway. Cause all you've got left is your frickin' revenge. Ennis is showing remarkable self-awareness here. It's hard to believe that this is the same man who would go on to write Crossed and The Boys. Hellblazer is always showing how every member of a privileged group feeds into oppression, and that includes how every man feeds into patriarchy, even if they don't recognize that they are. Helen's suffering becomes commodified. It becomes consumable for John's own suffering. He is literally trying to fridge his friend. I bring this scene up because this is the sin of later Hellblazer. In order to explain it, I need to explain Gemma Masters. Gemma idolized her uncle when she was a child. He was always old reliable, the one person who would understand her. He never liked her being part of his world and having an interest in magic. He loved her too much for that. He knew what that life would bring. but she was already touched by it. In her very first appearance, she's nearly killed by a demon-worshipping pedophile before John even steps in to save her. The danger wasn't his fault, and it's an important distinction to make. The very first text box that introduces her reads as follows: Gemma is fed up. Even the rotten park is empty. The child is meant to flourish in the park, but Hellblazer is about rot, and Gemma has been exposed to that rot since day one. Mike Carey's run explores how in over her head she can be, and it's a reminder that any young woman finding her way in the world shouldn't be doing it alone. But her parents don't get this part of the world like John does. When Gemma, in her 20s, starts to take on the occult interests of her uncle, it's her choice. It's not John's to decide. Gemma's danger doesn't come from choosing the occult. It comes from a world that is already dangerous to her. The best she could do was choose to understand it and gain autonomy. Magic in Hellblazer is very versatile in how it can be used metaphorically. In the case of people like John, it can be addiction. But for people like Mercury, it's part of who they are in a deeply spiritual sense. Gemma could have very easily become the next Mercury, and that's what makes it so important that John and Mercury had this somewhat paternalistic relationship. It was a window into what he and Gemma could have been when Gemma ultimately made the decision of her own volition. John can be good with kids. He can be better, for not just himself, but for those around him. Pushing Gemma away would not have helped her. And this is what the final author of the original Hellblazer, Peter Milligan, misunderstood. During the reception for John's wedding, a demon clone of him that he created long ago forced himself onto her. To me, when this happened, it reaffirmed that her character, her suffering, her connection to the magic of the world older than both her and John were nothing but commodities in service to his character. It fulfilled the prophecy that Ennis warned about with how John reacted to Helen. It being a monster that wore his face and used his voice made it all about him. Did he rape her? Brian Azzarello, the only American to lead a run on Hellblazer, filled John's story with unnecessary, sexually revolting suffering for no other reason but to remind us, the readers, that we were born to suffer. And that's never been Hellblazer. Anyway, the rape of Gemma is juxtaposed with the happy wedding of the late 50s John and his wife, Epiphany, a girl in her early 20s, younger than Gemma. Blue-haired, sexy, manic pixie dream girl who was apparently the only woman who ever really understood him. Misogynistic commodity at its finest. I find Milligan's writing in Hellblazer revolting. I do think the final issue is worth discussing though, especially before I touch upon what I believe to be the true revival and savior of Hellblazer. Peter Milligan definitely did not expect to be the final writer, but he did craft the final arc with an intent to conclude the story. In issue 300's final moments, John confronts Gemma, broken and suicidal from her assault, and he gives her a choice, a special bullet made for him, because he wanted to offer her closure. She was his sister's kid. If he was going to die, it would be her decision, not his. The decision of the one whom he loved the most. Hellblazer issue 300 asks one question. What does a con man fear the most? The final panel of Hellblazer shows John as an old man in the pub. The drinks on the back all have the names of writers who have worked on Hellblazer. He looks terrified. John has sold his soul to the devil triumvirate. He had outwitted God. He had conned his way out of every situation. There was no conceivable way for his story to end. He'd only keep conning and conning. But Flashpoint and the New 52 reboot forced his series into cancellation. John had lived a life of escaping higher powers, but the highest power finally got him. The executives. They existed beyond the page. The anti-establishment rebel was finally brought down. When Gemma fires the bullet at her uncle, we don't see it. When we turn the page, the bullet is flying through white space as if breaking through the panels of the medium. John broke those panels as a boy when he wanted to be a better man, when he thought he could change his story. But the power is out of his hands here. DC, corporate capitalism, they're the real gods. It was Gemma's decision because the highest power that John could conceive of was love. It was a power that he could not reason with. What does a con man fear the most? He fears the jig being up. The bottles have the names of writers. The bottles made him. And so, for his niece, in service of the highest power, he spent his days drinking in that bar as the world went by, accomplishing nothing. The con man was unable to outrun the executives. The con man was unable to outrun his own love. After a lifetime of damning friends and family, he became the old man in the bar that went nowhere. This is his nightmare. John Constantine never escaped hell. He brought it with him. After this, John became a PG-13 cape shit bloke. I think the idea of the Justice League Dark is neat. I mean, Alan Moore already did it in Swamp Thing back in 1982, but what you gonna do? Now, Simon Oliver in 2016 and his work on Hellblazer Rebirth actually did try to remedy things. He's English, he clearly loves the character, and he even brought back Mercury. But there was only so much that he could do.
Now this is where I'm meant to be.
All of this changed with Sandman's 30th anniversary and the launch of Sandman Universe. It was a line of various spin-offs about the multitude of characters that appeared in the original Sandman series. That included John Constantine, who received the one-shot titled The Best Version of You. It was written by Cy Spurrier, and will be followed by what I believe to be some of, if not the, best that Hellblazer and John Constantine have ever been. Everything before this point was preliminary. This is the book that I actually wanted to talk about. The one-shot opens in the midst of the Great Magical War, one in which Tim Hunter destroyed the world. Tim Hunter was the protagonist of the miniseries Books of Magic, in which he was educated by many magicians, including John Constantine, on the magic of the DC multiverse. He was an anomaly, not destined for anything, but with the potential to become the greatest. And here, he became the greatest threat to mankind. Right here, from the beginning of Spurrier's Hellblazer, John is bearing guilt. It was his responsibility to guide the boy down the right path. And having reached the end of the line, he's met by what appears to be the older version of him, as seen in the final page of Hellblazer issue 300. John recalls bits and pieces from across the multiverse, Vertigo, New 52, hell, even Keanu from the 2005 film. This one-shot is about continuity. The older John tells him that he has but one responsibility, to be the best version of himself. And he's sent away to 2019, leaving the Ravenscar mental asylum and coming across some rather racist anti-immigrant graffiti. Spurrier's Hellblazer is very meta, especially in regards to its timeline. Or rather, its lack of one. John's mind can't make sense of his various memories in the same way that Spurrier, as a comic writer, has to make sense of continuity before he can tell a good story. Spurrier's Hellblazer is about storytelling, especially in its latter half, Dead in America, but we'll get to that in a bit. The first half of Spurrier's run is a successful modernization of the original Vertigo series. It's domestic horror, but set decades ahead of where John's story started. And so, John decides to get back on the horse, telling continuity to bugger off, and that the only question worth asking is, what really matters right now? But stalking him is old John, as if feeding off of his resolve. There's a lot of episodic adventures in these 13 issues. One of my favourites is about a fish salesman who uses the love of a female mermaid to find fish. This is because of immigrants and the French stealing all of their catches. Definitely, it has nothing to do with how badly England is destroying itself. No, it's always someone else. And when the mermaid inevitably can't find any more fish, well, I'll leave the rest up to you. It's not as visceral and sexual as Delano's ecofeminist critique, but it's a reminder of how interconnected everything is. How oppression is interconnected, just as how magic is, whether it be ley lines, demons, or mermaids. or Albion, the myth of a greater England, the legend of false nationalistic nostalgia. You see, there's something below Parliament, a horrible mass of fuckable officers that the saggy, repulsive, elder elite hedonistically indulge in. And it's called Albion. The trade paperback has an issue between the issue 0 one-shot and issue 1, that being an issue of the New Books of Magic series. In it, the 2019 Tim Hunter runs across John, who is very much in the position of a predator stalking its prey, waiting to strike. He has seen what has come to pass. But instead of killing the boy, John gives Hunter the opportunity to prove his goodness. Rather than saving his own skin, John puts it on the line for the next generation. There's a moment in the first issue where John tells a joke about the Prince of England. This reminds us of where the conflict is. It's one of class, one of gender, one of race, one of generations, one of the various interconnecting systems of oppression. You see, the old John is not Verti-gone John, and he's not an alternate universe John. He's a tulpa created by John in his dying moments, manifested from his will to not die and his desire to grow old. And he'll do whatever it takes to do so. He's a con man in the way that John never was, willing to step over anyone, even the youth. For his ultimate plan is to take John's life for himself, a life free of guilt. Hence why he tells him to be the best version of himself, which in old John's mind means to live carefree. Old John will survive no matter what. He takes the form of Verti-gone John because he is the nostalgia that we, the audience, have. But he's also a reminder of the world we never knew, coming from Peter Milligan's run, one that was widely disliked. We might wish for the past when Hellblazer was great, but it wasn't all as great as we'd like to remember. And Spurrier acknowledges that, and asks, how do we make something great here in the present? And I know that Spurrier also greatly disliked that part of Hellblazer, because of a limited series that he wrote after this for Boom Comics. It was called Damn Them All, about a wisecracking exorcist drinker named Ellie Hawthorne. Very Hellblazer inspired, but what's most important is the setup, that being her picking up the slack from where her dead uncle left off. An exorcist uncle. And her go-to tool is a hammer. It's obvious what this is. This is Spurrier wanting to write Hellblazer, but also wanting to give Gemma Masters her dues, to show that she and the next generation can stand on their own 2 feet, and that the previous generation should do their absolute best to steady the ground beneath their feet, to try their best to not spread the rot. It's hard-boiled, it's clever, it's bleakly funny, but above all, it's angry to its core. Angry at the world, angry at injustice, at the cunts who run the show, and ultimately at the creator responsible for this utterly imperfect creation. Old John is pride. Pride for Albion and the myth of a greater England. And John foils his plan to take his body through manipulating one of his supporting characters, that being the teenage boy Noah Ikumelo. Noah is black. Noah is deaf. He embodies the interconnectedness of oppression and societal neglect. After his mother fell into a coma during his childhood, he started running with a gang. And John comes to learn that Noah is his son, although the boy doesn't know it. A son that he neglected. A son with a mother that John let rot. And to defeat old John, John does exactly what the generations who have left the youth with nothing did. He taints the soul of his son and makes him bear the weight of his sins. He makes Noah kill a man. It sounds like what the older generation do, but there's an important distinction. You see, it's the pride of their nostalgia that holds the rest of us back. But what makes John different is that he feels guilt, and guilt is incompatible with old John. Guilt is an admission of wrongdoing and an acceptance of responsibility. John failed Gemma, and he failed Noah. There's an intentional parallel to Milligan's ending. However, John, rather than abandoning his son as he did to Gemma, takes him with him. Because for all of the self-aggrandizing wallowing he can do about how he poisons everyone around him, it's a father's responsibility to raise his son. It's John's responsibility to not pass on his own trauma. I said earlier that America is an extension of England, only that its rot outgrew England. The theme of responsibility that is integral to Spurrier's Hellblazer is about this. About England, about the world that it's created for itself, and the paradoxical nostalgia that it holds for a time before. Immigration is bad at destroying our country, yet you created the instability in which they had to leave their homes. It's your responsibility to take care of those immigrants and refugees. It's the abuser's responsibility to make it up to those whom they've wronged. This relates back to Spurrier, who was given the responsibility to make sense of the messy past that he wasn't actually guilty of creating. And he defyingly stands against it and says, no, I will actualize my own goals and desires, no matter how heavy a burden those above me try to throw down on me. He's freeing himself from that burden, not only for his own sake, but for us, the readers. He's picking up the pieces. And so, Spurrier's initial Hellblazer series ends with John, Noah, and their surviving ally Natasha on the run. And it was cancelled. On his personal blog, Spurrier wrote, "I am not ready to let Hellblazer go." He admitted that the series was cancelled for not making enough money. Simple as that. And the frustration of a working artist trying to create something eventually spins into him just going over everything that his run, and Hellblazer as a whole, was about. This is a working class domestic horror. And all of the best Hellblazer writers understand that reality deeply. He says, "This has broken me, because because it's 2020, and the bastards are in charge, and the world's on fire, and god damn it, we tried, haven't we? Giving the heroes a chance to stand up and lead the way and show us how it's done, on the page, on the screen, and at the debating lectern. And all it's gotten us is an argument over what it means to be a hero, and shouting matches between this lot's notion of a good person versus that lot's notion of a good person, and they're all filthy rich and dead in the heart, and the shadows are oozing with unrealized myth, and the workers are hoodwinked by the lords and ladies to misdirect their hatred towards anyone different." It was after this that Spurrier wrote Damn Them All, in which his anger and frustration and willingness to keep on going was laid bare. The tulpa that was old John was John's will to live, his will to keep the story going at any cost. And Spurrier shared that drive. His art was killed by corporate capitalism, and he was willing to claw and scrape and fight his way back to life. And he received that chance in 2024, with the limited series Dead in America. Magic is rotting in Hellblazer, but it can also be something beautiful and natural. Spurrier fancies himself a magician, his magic being storytelling. This was set up all the way back in Delano's run with issue 23, Larger Than Life, in which it's revealed that fictional characters do exist in Hellblazer, as in-universe fictional characters who are brought into existence by, I guess, the will of the readers. The 10-year anniversary for Hellblazer, issue 120, ends with John lifting his beer to the audience in a pub full of Hellblazer authors and saying, "Reality's just a story that's taken a life of its own." I discussed Hellblazer's connection between the US and England earlier, but not in the artistic sense. America was a nation founded on ideals, on a myth, on a story, on magic. But as the title of Dead in America suggests, the United States is where magic and John Constantine go to die. It's Spurrier, a working class English storyteller, facing the heart of the rot that is no longer in the hands of England. Dead in America is about uncovering that rot on the domestic, legal, cultural, industrial, and spiritual levels of the United States. But this limited series is more than a finale to Spurrier's Hellblazer, and John Constantine as a whole. It's an epilogue to the Sandman universe. Spurrier was one of the lead writers behind the 30th anniversary, and Dead in America came out long after the conclusion of the 5-year publishing initiative. It's a very thematically dense story. It deserves its own thorough deep dive separate to this video, but I'll only be discussing what I find relevant to this overall analysis. The comic opens with a cold open of a decrepit, rotting John crawling along the ground, stumbling across a porno, and then falling down a mountain. It's a flash forward that conveys two things. Firstly, that porn is American art. So, American art is hedonistic, corrupt, soulless, exploitative, evil. I'm not going to go into that. All I'm going to say is that it only benefits a strict minority of people. Anyway, the second thing that this flash forward conveys, on part of being a flash forward, is that John is a fictional character trapped in this narrative written by the author. The antagonists of Dead in America are the kindly ones from Sandman. Some would consider them the Furies or the Fates of Greek mythology, but they actually embody the entirety of the three goddess archetype that continually finds itself reoccurring throughout pagan beliefs and spiritual philosophy. They are ever changing, with the infinite potential of stories to inspire and change. And in the modern day, they are at the will of the United States of America. They are vengeful, spiteful, xenophobic, and cruel. Reality is dream manifested. Dreams dictate reality. Stories dictate reality. Speaking of, the main character of Sandman, Dream of the Endless, also plays an important role in this story. Spoilers for the Sandman comic and Netflix adaptation. This dream is, of course, Daniel, who took the mantle of Dream of the Endless when his father, Morpheus, died. This Daniel doesn't act very similar to how the original story would expect you to believe. He's not benevolent and kind, but righteous and angry, like Morpheus. Because he's not just Daniel, he's Dream. He's an idea, he's a story. In issue 6 of Dead in America, Spurrier introduces the idea of metamancy. I'll let John explain it. Alright, look. Most magic, it's a trick. Any old cunt can do it. You make someone see the world differently and the world just sorta plays along. Problem is, some sods just want to focus on the way they see the world. Keep themselves at the center of the story. Mostly that's as far as it goes. Not as yelling at the sky. But now and then you get a special case. A willful asshole. Ambitious, arrogant, don't give a Tommy tit about the cost. Metamancer. Never mind, what they're really doing is turning everyone else into supporting characters. Once you start feeding the story, it just wants more. Does any of this sound familiar to you? The main character syndrome, turning everyone else into supporting characters, ambitious, arrogant assholes. It's John. It's John. And it's England. And it's America. It's the rot. A rot that, once you start feeding, only wants more. I tried to float over the horror, but it laughed and offered me a job. I tried to write my own story. Instead, I became a B-plot in his. The climax of Dead in America takes place in a Hollywood studio. It's the heart of the rot. It's the heart of the myth. Noah learns that John had planned to damn him to save his own soul. And so, Noah attacks him. After everything that John put him and those around him through, Noah would finally end the suffering, but he stops. John actually wanted Noah to kill him. That way, Noah would be damned in John's place for patricide. Noah didn't know those details, but in the moment, he chose to show mercy. The only time that John's plan failed was when he failed to consider that his son wouldn't be worthless scum like him. John failed to believe that even a single drop of his blood was not tainted, was not rotten. No. The moment of relinquishing isn't framed by a panel. Men do some strange things in this world, boy. Things only God and them understand. You'll be one of them then, poor little sod. Noah, like the young John, breaks the panel. breaks the narrative being constructed for him. But unlike his father, Noah stays true to it. Noah breaks free of the story that John is writing. I am better than you. In Jamie Delano's run, when John meets the ghost of his father, whose death John felt responsible for, John joked, "Come on, Dad. All boys kill their fathers." It was a reference to Oedipus. Dead in America is full of modernizations of Greek myth, on part of it being a Sandman spin-off. And here it comes full circle. Noah will not let himself be defined by the myth. He will not be tainted by the rot. This is the culmination of Hellblazer. John then beats his son to death, and is dragged to hell by the kindly ones for his act of filicide. It's here that we discover a deal that he previously made. John had bargained for Noah's life. The price? My son lives undamned. And so, Noah is resurrected, and the kindly ones can't do shit to John. And he lambasts them for their lack of zinnia, that being the Greek custom of hospitality. It was a metaphysical law that the Greeks had to obey, lest their visitors be gods in disguise. And they are guests, Americans. I mean, let's not be so stupid about that. 6 generations or a couple of months off the boat, it's all the same. Normal wankers pursuing a normal desire, a better life for them and their kids. Can't be right for some and wrong for the rest. We're all visitors hoping for a bowl of soup and a warm spot out of the rain. Difference is, some cunts will put their feet on the table, say it's their soup and always was. You have murdered your own child. After Dream takes care of the kindly ones, John asks him, now that he's back in charge, if he'd try and be better. John Constantine was first introduced in the pages of Swamp Thing. His story began with Swamp Thing. And when Dream refuses to consider John's suggestion, John calls on Swamp Thing to hold the dreaming hostage. It's the green versus the dream, the earth versus the rot, both sides of magic, both infinite in their potential for beauty, but both infinite in their potential for cruelty. And so, Dream obliges, helping those wronged along the way. John isn't running this time. He's brought back to life, but dying from all of the tumours. You might recall that time that John tricked the Devil Triumvirate to cure his cancer. This isn't an option here. And so we find ourselves back where we began, dead in America. John is picked up by his mates and taken to the beach for a burial. A beach, much like the one where his gravestone was at the end of Delano's run. The beach where he strove to be a better. Noah is given the ability to speak. He initially lost his voice for magical reasons. I understand what Speria was going for, but it's not a very good look and comes across as him seeing mutism as something to fix, something to other. But aside from that, this ending, where Noah forgives his father, is something really beautiful. John has never been forgiven. It doesn't matter if he deserves it or not. Noah is forgiving his father to free himself of the chains that the elder generation threw onto him. The biblical Noah made a covenant with God after the great flood. It was a new start after scourging the earth of mankind's wickedness. And Noah Ikumelo watches as his father is buried at sea. I fucking hate kids. John was a liar, to others and to himself. John had the capacity for goodness, for redemption. It's just that he finally put in the work to redeem himself, to change things for the better. For Tim, for Noah, and for Daniel, the same way Speria did for Gemma. In the afterlife, John meets Death of the Endless, a character from Sandman that embodies the end. When the first living thing existed, I was there waiting. When the last living thing dies, my job will be finished. I'll put the chairs on the table, turn out the lights, and lock the universe behind me when I leave. John's best mate was a bloke called Chaz. At the beginning of Speria's run, John finds him comatose, on the verge of death. He offers to save him and damn another lady instead, but Chaz's spirit refuses, and John, tear-stricken, leaves his friend with the question, how do you baffle a vegetable? It's a reference to his time in Swamp Thing, in which he makes the exact same pun. The unspoken answer is, you leave. Because that's what John has always done. He leaves, he abandons, he escapes. But here, John's finally broken free of that self-inflicting cycle. And when death is ready to take off with him, she indulges him. She lets him tell her a joke. How do you confuse an anxious reader? I don't know. How do you confuse an anxious reader? John? The answer is found in the non-diegetic text. And you end the story. The chairs are up. They likely have been for a long time. How long was death waiting there? How much time passed between pages? We don't know. She doesn't know. But John, with his metamancy, does. He is a step above the fiction. Because any good con man will continue to raise the stakes to avoid being caught. Whatever it takes to avoid the jig being up. This is his victory after his defeat at the hands of DC executives in issue 300. This is his victory of life over the rot. Everything lives.